Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to sift through a whole stack of research and sources, basically pull out the really potent insights so you can get up to speed fast. Today, we're tackling something that, well, it probably keeps a lot of HR managers, business owners, anyone leading a team up at night. That's the issue of underperforming teams. It's subtle sometimes, but the impact, huge. And look, our mission today isn't just to complain about the problem. We want to go deeper. We're digging into the material to pull out really practical, actionable strategies, things you can actually use to move the needle. We're talking about, real turnarounds, maybe a sales team that was missing targets, suddenly smashing them, or a project team that was always a bottleneck, actually delivering ahead of schedule. Yeah, this deep dive is all about arming you with those maybe surprising facts and those focused approaches to really make a change. So, okay, let's start at the beginning. Like any good diagnosis, right? What does underperformance actually look like? Because, it's often not super obvious.
That's absolutely right. It's rarely as simple as someone just, not doing their job visibly. Underperformance can be quite subtle, maybe a slow decline in the quality of work that kind of creeps up on you, or a growing disengagement. You see it in a lack of initiative, perhaps. For HR folks, maybe you see it manifest as like more minor conflicts between people, or an uptick in requests for internal transfers that you can't quite explain. Business owners, they might trace it back to customer acquisition slowing down, or maybe just that quiet quitting vibe where people are doing the bare minimum.
Just enough.
Exactly. And the sources we looked at point out something really interesting. It's not just about what isn't getting done. It's also about what is happening. So, for instance, a customer service team. Maybe their response times are climbing. That's a clear sign. But so is a lack of new ideas in brainstorms, or just silence in meetings. And that silence, the research suggests, isn't just shyness. It could be a really strong sign of mental disengagement.
Right, and that connects directly to a key point in the material, doesn't it? Identifying the stuff early. It's not just good practice, it's like, preventative.
Absolutely. Preventative medicine, that's a good way to put it.
Catching those subtle signs before they sort of compound, before they snowball.
Yeah, because if you wait too long, you're not just fixing one problem, you're trying to stop something that's already gathered a lot of momentum downhill.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, so if we've spotted the symptoms, the next logical step is figuring out the why. Teams don't just randomly start underperforming, right? There have to be reasons. What are some of those maybe deeper root causes the sources point to, things we might overlook?
Exactly. They don't operate in a vacuum. And one of the biggest culprits, something that comes up again and again in the case studies, is the assumption of clarity around goals. Leaders often think they've been clear about targets, but if the team isn't hitting them consistently, it often comes down to this unspoken gap, this disconnect about what good actually looks like day to day.
Ah, okay, so misalignment.
Misalignment, yeah. And beyond that, you've got the classic, not enough resources. Could be outdated software, not enough people, maybe just not enough training on a new system they're supposed to use.
That sounds familiar.
Right. And the source material also really highlights problematic leadership styles. Micromanagement, for example. It just drains initiative, makes people passive. But the opposite extreme isn't great either. A completely hands-off approach can leave teams feeling lost, adrift, and then there's just plain low morale. That can come from anything unresolved, team conflicts, feeling unappreciated, lack of recognition. Think about, say, a warehouse team. Maybe they're struggling because they weren't trained properly on a new inventory system, or their scanning tools are constantly glitching, or maybe they don't even have a clear quota for the day.
So they're set up to fail, essentially.
Pretty much. It's often this mix, this interplay of different factors.
You know what's really insightful about this, reading through the sources, is how it shifts the focus. It moves away from blaming individuals. It's more about diagnosing the system, right? Of finding those weak spots in the process or the structure or the support that are actually allowing the underperformance. That shift in perspective feels really important.
It is. It's fundamental to actually fixing the problem long term.
Okay, so we've got the what the signs and we've dug into the why the root causes. Now, the crucial part, how do we actually turn things around? The sources lay out a pretty clear roadmap, and the first big strategy they really emphasize is setting crystal clear expectations. It sounds basic, but it seems foundational.
It absolutely is. Foundational is the right word. A really common issue is just fuzziness around roles. Who does what? When people aren't exactly sure where their job starts and ends, you get overlaps, wasted effort. Or worse, things just fall through the cracks because everyone assumes someone else is handling it.
Or people hesitate to act.
Exactly. Hesitation. So the solution, according to the research, isn't just about having a formal job description filed away somewhere. It's about everyone understanding their swim lane for this project or for this week's tasks. Like, okay, the graphic designer, they own the layout. The developer, they own the code. Clear boundaries, less confusion, less stepping on toes.
And the ways to do this, they seem pretty straightforward but effective. Things like quick team huddles just to clarify who's doing what on a specific task.
Yep, or even simple shared documents.
Right, shared docs outlining responsibilities. For a small business owner, maybe it's just a quick 15-minute check-in each week, really mapping out priorities.
Mm-hmm. And that clarity, it does more than just prevent errors. The sources suggest it actually builds confidence. People know what they're accountable for, what's theirs to own.
Okay, so role clarity is step one. Building on that, the material highlights another, almost like a game changer for clarity, SMART goals. Now, most people listening probably know what SMART goals are: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. But the sources offer a bit more nuance, right, about why they sometimes fail.
They do. SMART seems simple on the surface. But a common pitfall, and the research really points this out, is glossing over the achievable part in a practical sense. We make goals measurable, sure, but then maybe we don't actually provide the resources or the training needed to hit them. So instead of motivating, the goal just becomes, well, demotivating.
Setting them up to failure.
Right. For example, telling a support team, okay, cut response time by 20% in 2 months. That sounds like a solid SMART goal. But if you don't also maybe invest in better software for them or adjust staffing levels if needed, that goal just becomes a source of stress, not achievement.
Got it. So the A needs real backing.
Precisely. Or another example, maybe a factory crew aiming to assemble 50 units daily by next quarter. Great, it's specific, measurable, time-bound.
Yeah.
But the deeper insight from the sources is about the conversation that needs to happen around achievable. Does the team actually have the right tools? Is the equipment reliable? Are the parts arriving on time? SMART goals shouldn't just be the target. They should trigger the discussion about the support systems required to realistically hit that target.
That's a really key distinction. It's not just the goal itself, but the whole ecosystem around it, the support needed to make it achievable, which leads us perfectly into the next big pillar from the research, really empowering teams with genuine support and the right resources.
Absolutely, because a team that doesn't have the right tools or maybe isn't staffed adequately for the workload, I mean, you're basically running a race with weights on their ankles. They're set up for chronic underperformance.
Right.
Think about a sales team wrestling with a clunky old CRM system, or a delivery team whose vans are always breaking down. It's frustrating and inefficient.
So how do you find those gaps? Is it just about asking?
Asking is huge. The sources emphasize that simply doing an inventory check isn't enough. The most effective way, often, is what some call a process walkthrough, or a Gemba walk. Actually going to where the work happens, observing the flow, and crucially, asking the team directly, hey, what's the biggest thing slowing you down every day?
Yeah.
But they know. They're living it. They know exactly where the friction points are.
Yeah, I can see how that direct observation, that direct feedback would uncover things a survey just wouldn't catch. And the examples of fixes in the sources aren't always massive, are they? It could be like getting new GPS software for delivery drivers.
Or upgrading a slow internet connection for a team doing a lot of online work.
Yeah, or just finally doing that training on the new system everyone's been complaining about. It's not always about spending huge amounts of money.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's removing a persistent daily frustration. And the material is really clear on this. Addressing these gaps isn't a nice to have. It's a fundamental investment.
Yeah.
Because when you give people the right support, it does more than just make them efficient. It sends a really strong signal. We value your work. We want you to succeed. That's a huge morale booster.
Shows you're listening to.
Totally. And that directly ties into better output. The sources even mention how certain tools or platforms like Centrient was mentioned as an example type, can help centralize things like training and resources, making sure everyone has easy access.
Okay, so clear goals backed by real resources. That makes sense. But the material also digs into something less tangible, but maybe even more important, the work environment itself.
Oh, absolutely. Often overlooked, but critical.
And a huge part of that environment, the sources argue, is building genuine trust.
Trust is the bedrock. It really is. Without it, the research shows people clam up, they self-censor, they don't share ideas freely because they're afraid of being judged or shot down.
Or making a mistake.
Or making a mistake, exactly. And that fear inevitably stifles performance. Now, here's a key insight. Building trust often involves what some call the vulnerability paradox.
Mhm.
Real leadership, the kind that builds trust, isn't always about projecting strength and perfection.
Mm.
Sometimes it's about being willing to say, you know what, I made a mistake here, or I'm not sure about this outcome.
Being human.
Being human. That vulnerability, paradoxically, builds more trust than pretending to have all the answers ever could. Leaders need to model it,
Yeah.
share honest updates,
Mm.
good and bad, and really truly listen to people's ideas, even the half-baked ones.
That's powerful. If vulnerability is a strength, you can really picture the difference, right? A team brainstorming solutions. If there's high trust, ideas are flying, people are building off each other, it's okay to throw out something wild.
Yeah, safe.
But if trust is low, silence. Or just the safest, most obvious suggestions, innovation just dies on the vine.
Precisely. That psychological safety that trust creates. It's not just feel-good stuff. It's a practical requirement for getting people engaged, sparking ownership, and driving high performance over the long haul.
Okay, and tied directly to that safety and trust. The research talks a lot about recognition, celebrating effort.
Yes. And it's amazing how often this gets missed or done poorly. Teams that feel like their hard work is invisible, that those extra efforts, those small wins, just vanish into the ether. They won't keep pushing. Why would they? The solution, the source's stress, isn't complicated. It's about genuine, specific recognition.
Not just a generic good job.
No, exactly. Be specific. Did a coder finally fix that really annoying bug that was plaguing everyone? Call it out in the team meeting. Explain the impact of what they did. Did someone in customer service handle a really difficult client with amazing skill and calm? Shoot them a personal email saying you noticed and appreciate how they handled it.
Concrete examples.
Yeah, the material gives great ones. Like
Yeah.
a warehouse team nails a really tough shipping target. Maybe it's a shout out in the company newsletter or the manager buys coffee for the team. Small things.
Right.
They don't have to be huge gestures, but they consistently reinforce your effort is seen. Your effort is valued. People naturally repeat behaviors that get positive attention.
It's a feedback loop.
It's a simple, powerful feedback loop. Ignoring effort is basically telling people, don't bother trying so hard next time. Morale dips and performance follows right behind.
Okay, that's a lot of ground we've covered. So let's boil it down. For you listening, what are the core actionable takeaways from this deep dive?
Right, let's recap. We basically pulled out 7 key levers here, based on the sources, for really effective performance management. First, get good at spotting underperformance early. Look for those subtle signs, the low energy, maybe more complaints, that silent disengagement we talked about. Don't wait for it to become a huge problem.
Be proactive.
Proactive, yes. Second, champion crystal clear roles. Make sure everyone knows exactly what their responsibilities are. Cut out the ambiguity. Third, use SMART goals, definitely. But really lean into that achievable part. Make sure the goals are backed by the necessary support and resources. It's about the system, not just the target.
Right.
Fourth, proactively provide the right tools and resources. Actively look for and remove those frustrating bottlenecks that hinder people. Ask them what they need. Fifth, invest in training and upskilling. Build competence. Build confidence. It pays off.
Makes sense.
Sixth, actively build trust. Be transparent. Be open. Show a bit of vulnerability yourself. Create that safe space where ideas can flow. And seventh, finally, don't forget to praise effort. Recognize those small wins specifically and genuinely. It keeps morale high and reinforces the behaviors you want to see.
You know, when you lay it out like that, transforming an underperforming team, it doesn't sound like magic, does it?
Not at all.
It's about doing performance management thoughtfully, intentionally, with
Yeah.
real insight.
Exactly. It's about seeing the signs, digging for the real root causes, not just the surface stuff, and then strategically putting these pieces in place. The clarity, the support, the trust, the recognition.
And these steps, as you said, they aren't just for big companies with huge HR teams, right?
Absolutely not. These are things a business owner with a small team can implement just as effectively. They're designed to make a tangible difference in productivity, lift morale, and, ultimately help the bottom line.
So here's something to think about as we wrap up. Considering everything we've discussed today, diagnosing the causes, implementing these solutions, what's maybe one specific, possibly overlooked weak spot in your team's system and how things operate that you're now thinking maybe you should investigate first? Ready to make that change happen? Go on, get started today.